you'll remember that when we went through the history of the council, we talked about the modernization of the Pittman-Robertson Act to free up some of those dollars for R3 needs and also create these additional funds, an additional $5 million in the multi-state conservation grant process that I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with, but I'm not going to dive any more into it. We're just going to introduce Silvana, who's the program manager at AFWA, and let her take it away and give us all of the details.
Okay, so you can see the slideshow, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So my name is Silvana. It's hard with these webinars. I don't see names, but 300 people there. I'm sure a lot of you have talked to me. I have been with AFWA for 5 years. I also come from a family that never hunted or fished. And I used to chase my grandpa when he went fishing, and he would yell back at me, "Go home, girl. Girls don't fish." I would like insist, and he would be like, "Okay, you are my boy today." And that didn't traumatize me, I guess. Now I'm turned from a city girl to a angler and hunter. So with the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, first, the wildlife restoration and sport fish restoration programs are arguably two of the most successful conservation programs in history. Last year, for 2021, there was about $1.1 billion provided through these two mandatory programs to state fish and wildlife agencies. In 2000, both the Wildlife Restoration and Sport Fish Restoration Acts were amended by the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Programs Improvement Act, and that created the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, which we refer to as traditional multi-state grants program these days. In last year, actually in 2019, I wanted to skip 2020, it wasn't a good year. In 2019, the PR Modernization Act came into law, and that added another $5 million for R3 grants to the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program. The purpose of the program is to address regional and national priority needs of state fish and wildlife agencies and their partners that are beyond the scale, scope, and capabilities of a single state. It is a unique financial assistance program in that it's not administered just by the service, but it's jointly administered in cooperation with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So the service publishes the annual notice of funding opportunity, setting various important dates in partnership with AFWA, and AFWA manages and conducts the review of all applications and submits a priority list of the projects that they recommend for funding. The service awards the funding, manages the grants, and ultimately closes the grants. When I started working with AFWA, this was really helpful for me, especially as I was going to work with the Trust Fund Committee. This is, for those that might not be familiar with where this funding comes from. First, let's look at the Wildlife Restoration Act. The Wildlife Restoration Trust Fund receives revenues from the excise taxes.
So,
this
Silvana,
excise, yes.
Really quick, I'm sorry. Your slides aren't moving. Are you seeing slides on your screen?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'm going to stop your share screen and pull up your PowerPoint if it's the same one that you sent me and just run through it on my screen. Is that okay?
Let me just a second. Okay, it's the second screen.
There we go.
How are we doing now?
Yep, we're good now.
Oh, I am sorry.
Okay. All right, continue on.
Okay, almost done with all technicalities. So where does all that revenue comes from? It's all taxes on the excise taxes on firearms and ammunitions, on pistols, revolvers, and handguns, and also on bows, quivers, broadhead arrows, and points. The interest collected on those revenues goes to the North American Wetlands Conservation Fund, And the rest of the revenues is distributed as you can see below. So we have the WIS for administration funds, gets some funds to manage their programs. Also, there's $3 million that comes from all the revenues, and that goes to the traditional multi-state conservation grant program. In 2019, this is the R3 where I was trying, oops. The R3 Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, and these come from the tax on bows, quivers, broadheads, and arrows. Also, those funds are deducted for hunter education, the enhanced hunter education, and the basic hunter education. The rest of it goes to the traditional wildlife restoration programs. The same okay. And then we have the Sportfish Restoration Act, the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, the traditional side of it also receives $3 million from the Sportfish Restoration Act. Also, the Sportfish Restoration Act gets the revenues from the tax on electric motors, tax on fishing equipment, import duties on tackle pleasure boats and yachts, motorboat fuel tax, small engine fuel tax, and also the interest on the trust fund. And the revenues are transferred. And then we have the initial deductions, again, with for administration funds for to manage the programs. And $3 million goes to the traditional multi-state conservation grant program. Also, we have the Sport Fishing Boating Partnership Council and the Fisheries Commissions. And the rest of it is distributed to coastal wetlands planning, coast guards, boating infrastructure, national outreach and communication programs, and sport fish restoration programs. So where does the traditional multi-state grant program is different with R3? Prior to 2020, we had only the traditional multi-state conservation grant program, and we had $6 million to under that program. Most of the grants that came from R3 were funded through the traditional multi-state conservation grant program. With the new act, the R3 Multi-State Conservation Grant Program was created, hunter recruitment and recreational shooter recruitment programs that promote a national hunting and shooting sports recruitment program, including communication and outreach activities. They went a little further and defined what the hunter recruitment and recreational shooter recruitment definition was. And this included a bunch of activities. A lot of those activities, as I mentioned, were funded under the traditional before, but there were a few activities that were not eligible under the traditional multi-state conservation grant program. And also there was like less funding, it was just like 6 million. And now it's a $5 million just dedicated to the R3. So who is eligible to apply for the multi-state grants? We have a entity requirement. It has to be state or a group of states, U.S. and Fish and Wildlife Service, and they're specifically for the National Survey, nonprofit organizations, and also public and state-controlled institutions of higher education. Also, we have state benefited requirements. It has to benefit at least 26 states, majority of the states in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regions, and or a majority of the states belonging to a regional association of state fish and wildlife agencies. Another eligibility criteria is that it has to address at least one of the strategic priorities. Before 2020, we had national conservation needs. In 2020, this process changed, And now we have the strategic priorities. As you see, the highlighted part is where all the R3 grants go. The timeline. So we start in January, February with reviewing the strategic priorities. These are updated and they're reviewed and approved by the National Grants Committee and also the Executive Committee and the directors, the state directors at the North American Conference vote on the strategic priorities for the year. In March, WISFER publishes the Notice of Funding Opportunity. In May, the request for proposals, for initial proposals goes out right after the NOFO is published. The initial proposals are due in May. The applicants will submit the initial proposals through AFWA Multistate Conservation Grant Program portal. That's the link. I was hoping those slides would be shared because there are a lot of links there, but we can also put the links in the chat at some point. In early June, technical review teams established for the strategic priorities evaluate the initial proposals and provide the feedback to the applicants. The unsuccessful applicants are get all the information why their application didn't make it through, and that helps them for the next cycles if they plan to apply again. And those that are successful get feedback as well on what to improve for the full proposal. Late in June, the successful applicants are invited to submit the full grant proposals. Those are submitted through AFWA portal and the Grant Solutions site. All these proposals have to go through the AFWA portal because that's what we use with the reviewers to review the grants. In August, the technical review teams will evaluate the full grant proposals and they will compile a draft of priority list, which and they will make the recommendations as well to the National Grant Committee. In late August, the National Grants Committee discusses the draft priority list and the technical review team recommendations. September, the National Grants Committee establishes the priority list of the projects, and we have a National Grant Committee meeting happening at AFWA annual meeting every year, and they make recommendations to the directors. During the business meeting at AFWA annual meeting, the state directors will approve the priority list. In October, which is the deadline for the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, we send the priority list to the Fish and Wildlife Service. After that, the Fish and Wildlife Service will process and approve the grants in Grant Solutions. The grant period starts January 1st, and the Fish and Wildlife Service will manage and monitor the grants through the duration of the implementation. Also, they'll do the closing. So what does the timeline look like for this year? We are in the phase of the initial proposals. They're going to be due May 17th. And the yellow highlighted are our technical review teams review the proposals. So the National Grants Committee is made up of 8 members. They're all directors. We make sure that each Fish and Wildlife region is represented. And the technical review team, which reviews the proposals, provide feedbacks for the applicants, and recommends the draft priority list to the National Grants Committee. This year, we'll have 6 technical review teams, about 80 to 90 reviewers. They consist of subject matter experts. We have a lot of reviewers coming back from the last year. I guess it wasn't that bad. We are also recruiting new reviewers. Some of the committees might have received a call. Also, reviewers represent AFWA committee members, state and federal agencies, industry, nonprofit organizations, and other partners. And before they start with the review, they sign a conflict of interest form. And if they don't feel expert enough with some of the proposals, they don't review it because we have enough subject matter experts in the teams. Now, this is part that usually is done by the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'll go fast through that. I'm hoping also, I would say that we have a webinar link. We had a webinar early in the year, and we have the link in AFWA website. So it's really, really helpful if you are applying for this program for the first time to check out that webinar. This is more like a checklist, so I'm gonna go really fast through these. First, you need, when applying for the federal grants, you need to obtain a UEI. Right now it's known as DUNS. I think they're starting in 2022 with the new system, which is called UEI, but if you have a DUNS number, that works for this year and further. SAM registration is very important unless you are waived. The payments for the grants are made through ASAP. This is a federal system. You need to be registered if you need your funds. You also will need to be registered in Grant Solutions. That's where you are gonna enter your full grant proposal for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the whole process goes through there. You enter your grant, they approve it, you receive your award letter through Grant Solutions, you post your reports there. So this is a very important step. All the grants under the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program have to comply with 2 CFR 200 regulations. A lot of these is included in the notice of funding opportunity. So I highly encourage, when you are writing your full grant proposals, to pay a close attention to all requirements. Multi-State Conservation Grant Program awards only 1-year grants. So most of the reports will be that will be required will be like annual final reports. Some don't manage, some extend their grants because the activities are not completed within the 1 year. And in that case, you will probably be required to submit a interim report. Oh, tracks. This is new. It doesn't matter if it's your first time or second time or 10th time applying for a multi-state conservation grant program. This is new. If you are a first timer, the service is looking to give you a waiver for this year. The grant will still be entered in tracks, but will not be entered by you. For the rest of the organizations that have received grants before, and also even if you are a first timer but you are a state, you will be required to enter the grant in tracks by yourself. What is the tracks? I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. It's been in discussions for around probably 12 years now, something like that. Tracking and reporting actions for the conservation of species. It's the official reporting tool for all grants supported by all wildlife and sport fish restoration program. It's duplicative. Like you will have to enter your grants in tracks, you will have to enter your grants in grant solutions. It's required and we have to do it, and we cannot skip this step. The grant recipients will use tracks to report on the great work they achieve with their grant funding. The WISPR will use the system to provide the public, legislators, and key industry stakeholders with information on how grant money is used to achieve the program goals. If you read the NOFO for this year's Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, it will be there. So I just put it in this slides to show you that it's required. The proposal must be entered into tracks within 60 days of the later period of performance start date or the date the grant was approved. So these are the 4 stages we use for the grants. It's the first stage where the applicants are using, are working on their grant proposals, project statements, and approvals. This is one of the stages where you can enter your grant. You also can write your proposal through tracks, and it's ready. We can talk more in details about that. There isn't enough time to talk about that right now. The stage 2 is after October 1st, when we submit all multi-state grants to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And this is a process of like reviewing and getting ready the award letters. The stage 3 starts January 1st, where it's like the starting of the grant. This is the other stage where you are going to enter your performance reports. And those will go in tracks as well. And then the stage 4 is the closeout, where Fish and Wildlife Service looks at the grants and closes all the grants. These are some resources, and I would highly recommend, if you are applying for grants this year, to go to tracks training site at WISPR. It's very helpful, and it's really easy to navigate. You just log in as a guest. You don't need a login for that. I just want to mention that you won't be required to enter anything in tracks or grant solutions at the initial proposal phase. So at the moment that you know you are moving to the full grant proposals, and you are eligible to apply for a full grant proposal, then you'll be required to follow all those steps of signing up for all things you need. And I think I am done. How are we doing with time?
We're doing great. Thanks, Silvana. That was some great information. It can be a daunting process, but y'all are definitely making it a lot easier. And I'm looking forward to the track system to see how that goes. But what a great resource, having all those dollars available for R3 to work on the strategic priorities, work on various projects that are already helping us move forward. I mean, it's amazing how far we've come just in the past few years with the availability of that funding. So with that, we probably have time for about one question here. Do we have any questions? Or did Silvana just cover it that well?
Or is everyone ready for that margarita for Cinco de Mayo?
Oh, that sounds pretty good to me. We were talking about that earlier. Well, I guess with that, we'll go ahead and switch over to closing it out here. Haley has dropped a link to that webinar that Silvana was mentioning that's on the AF website that does a great job of covering it more in depth. if anybody is interested in that resource, it's there. But Silvana, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we're going to do our closeout and then let everybody get on with their
Thank you.
Wednesday. Thank you, Silvana. So a few closing remarks here. Nothing too long. I promise I'll let you go in just a minute. But I did want to highlight that, first of all, thank you everybody for participating and bearing with us with the technology issues here and there, but it went relatively smoothly and I learned a lot. I thought it was some great content and hopefully everybody else found the value in it as well. We did, if you didn't see it in the chat, we're recording this entire session. I'm going to break it up into the sessions, put it up on our YouTube, and it will go out to everybody that registered. Please feel free to share it. It'll be on our YouTube channel. And we're going to download the chat and share any of these link resources as well. I think Marty had asked about sharing these in the clearinghouse. We'll either put them in there or we might put them in there and then link them in the National R3 community, the online resource there. With that said, want to close out with a little bit of information about what we're doing in 2022. We're really excited because we're actually going to host an in-person event, assuming nothing else happens. We're pretty confident we're going to host an in-person event. So confident, we've already signed the contract. We've got the dates locked in, and it is going to be 2022. Let me pull up my screen here really quick and show you where you can find out more information. So here's our homepage. We've got events up here, and we've got the National R3 Symposium. As you saw in the beginning of the meeting, it's Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, right outside of Tulsa. And it's going to be May 2nd through the 5th. So we're going to start working on the agenda, solicit sponsorships. I think we're going to have a really great time. We'll make up for the fact that we didn't have a happy hour session here with the in-person happy hour that we'll do there. We're going to have some innovative sessions going on, a lot more working and meat to the meeting as you know, in person will allow us to do as compared to virtual. So please mark those dates down on your calendar. Look for more information from us in the next few months about details coming forward about that meeting, sponsorship opportunities, and we're likely going to do a training associated with it as well. So it'll be something for everybody, and we're looking forward to putting it on. With that, we are going to go ahead and close it out. Thanks again, everybody, for being willing to jump on here with us. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, shoot Haley an email, shoot Steve an email. All of our emails are on the website there. I want to give a special thank you to all of our presenters, but also the person that this meeting would not have happened without, and that is Haley Faith, our new program associate. She was pulling all the strings back there and making everything work for us. Haley, you want to say goodbye and then we'll...
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and have a margarita to celebrate.
All right. Thanks, Haley. Like I said, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Leith, Haley, or myself, or Tanaya. Tanaya might take a little while to get back to you because she's, you know, hasn't actually started yet, but shoot her a warm welcome. I know she'll appreciate it. With that, we look forward to catching up with all of you soon.